I used to avoid the hallway where he and his friends always lingered after school. It wasn't fear, not exactly, but that slow dread that settles into your stomach when you know you're about to be someone's punchline. You walk a little faster, you keep your eyes on the floor, you pray your hoodie swallows you whole. That was me for most of junior year. And he was the ringleader. The guy with the loudest laugh, the cockiest smirk, and the cruelest words hidden in jokes that made everyone else laugh along, except me. By the end of that year, I could recognize his laugh from 100 feet away. It had a way of curling into me like smoke under a door, the kind of laugh that said, "You're not one of us, and you never will be." I was the quiet one, the artsy one, the maybe he's gay one. I never said it out loud back then, but maybe that's what made me such an easy target. I was soft in a world that only rewarded hard edges. But no one tells you that high school cruelty doesn't always stay in high school. Sometimes it follows you. Sometimes it changes shape. Sometimes it turns into something you never expected. I saw him again 3 years later. Almost didn't recognize him. It was at this little downtown coffee shop that played soft jazz and smelled like cinnamon and old books. I was waiting for a friend who was late, flipping through my sketchbook with one earbud in when someone said my name. I looked up, and there he was. Landon. The same boy who used to mimic my walk in the hallways, who once called me princess loud enough for the whole cafeteria to hear. But here he stood. Softer, somehow. His jawline still sharp, but his eyes less cruel. There was something almost nervous in the way he said my name, like he wasn't sure if I'd recognize him, or if I'd want to. He asked if he could sit. And for some reason I still don't fully understand, I said yes. We talked, stilted at first, like two people walking across thin ice. He told me he was back in town for a while, that he'd dropped out of college, that he was trying to figure things out. He didn't say it, but I could see it, the cracks in the armor, the weight behind his eyes. He asked about my art, said he remembered how I used to draw all the time in class, that he thought I was really good, even back then. It caught me off guard. The sincerity. I didn't know what to do with it. Before he left, he asked if I wanted to hang out sometime. Catch up, he said. I almost laughed. Catch up, as if there had ever been anything between us except coldness and humiliation. But then he looked at me again. Really looked, and I realized maybe he regretted it. Maybe he remembered every cruel word, every snicker. Maybe that guilt had never stopped following him. So I said yes. I told myself I was just curious, that I wanted to see what kind of person he'd become. But the truth is, part of me wanted him to hurt, like I had. I wanted him to see me, really see me, and feel ashamed of everything he'd done. I didn't expect what actually happened. The more time we spent together, the harder it became to hold on to that anger. He wasn't who he used to be, not anymore. He laughed at my jokes, asked about my life, listened when I talked. Really listened. And when I looked into his eyes, I didn't see the boy who'd made fun of me anymore. I saw a man who was carrying something heavy and didn't know how to put it down. One night we were walking along the river after a movie. The air was cool, the sky full of stars. We talked about nothing and everything. Then he went quiet, stopped walking. I was awful to you, he said. I didn't say anything at first. I think about it a lot, he continued. The way I treated you. I thought if I laughed with everyone else, maybe no one would notice how scared I was. Scared of what? He looked at me then, and I swear the air changed, of how I felt around you. I didn't move. I couldn't. He stepped closer, not cocky, not sure of himself, almost trembling. I didn't know what it was back then. I just knew I couldn't stop looking at you. And that terrified me. The silence between us felt alive. And then he reached out, touched my hand. Lightly, like he was afraid I'd flinch. I didn't. His fingers laced with mine, and it was the softest kind of electricity, the kind that doesn't hurt, but makes your entire body pay attention. We stood like that for a long time. No one said anything else, but everything had changed. The first time he kissed me, it wasn't under a fireworks sky or in the pouring rain like in movies. It was in his car, parked outside my apartment. There was no music, no dramatic confession, just a quiet stillness that wrapped around us like a cocoon. He was nervous. I could feel it in the way his fingers drummed softly against the steering wheel. And I was terrified, too. Not of him anymore, but of what it would mean if I let myself want this. Want him. He looked over at me, eyes full of something tender and raw. Can I? I nodded. And then his lips were on mine, tentative, searching. It wasn't a perfect kiss. It was hesitant, uneven, and trembling, but it was real, so painfully, beautifully real. When we pulled apart, he didn't look away. He just rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "I've wanted to do that for so long." I should have felt victorious. This was the same guy who once made me feel so small, so invisible, and now he was the one unraveling, scared I might vanish if he blinked too long. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something softer, like grief and healing mixing in the same breath. That night I lay awake for hours thinking about how things can shift, how the people who once broke you can end up holding the pieces, and how sometimes they're just as broken as you are. Landon started showing up more often after that, not just physically, though he did that too, always with coffee or a half smile that meant he wanted to talk but didn't know how to start, but emotionally. He'd text me at midnight just to ask what I was thinking. He'd sit on my couch for hours while I worked on commissions, occasionally reaching out to touch my ankle like he needed to remind himself I was real. And sometimes, when he thought I wasn't looking, I'd catch him staring. Not in a creepy way, more like he was trying to memorize me. Once, while we were lying on my bed, his head on my chest, I asked him what changed. What made you come back into my life? He was quiet for a long time. I thought maybe he'd fallen asleep, but then he whispered, "I never forgot you." His voice broke a little on the last word. I used to laugh with my friends because I didn't know what else to do. I was 17 and angry at the whole world, at myself most of all. You were everything I didn't know how to be, brave, kind, open, and I hated that it made me want you. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just held him tighter. It wasn't perfect. Some days he would pull back, go quiet, retreat into himself. I'd ask if he was okay, and he'd smile that too wide smile that never reached his eyes and say, "Yeah, just tired." And I'd let it go, even though I knew it wasn't the truth. He was still fighting battles I couldn't see. But when the walls came down, those moments when he let himself be soft, those were the moments that made everything worth it. Like the time he cried in my arms because his father called, and just hearing his voice triggered a spiral he hadn't expected. He clung to me like he was drowning, whispering, "You're the only place I feel safe." And I just kept holding him, running my fingers through his hair, saying, "I've got you," over and over like a prayer. Or the time he brought me a sketchbook. "I want to see how you see the world," he said, "because it's beautiful when you talk about it." I cried that night, not because of the gift itself, but because of how much he was trying, how much he wanted to be someone better. One evening we went to this quiet spot just outside town, a hill overlooking the city where you could see all the lights like stars that had fallen to earth. He brought a blanket and 2 beers. We sat in silence for a while, just watching the skyline. And then, without looking at me, he said, "I used to think love was something you had to earn by being perfect. But you make it feel like it's just there, like I don't have to try so hard." I reached for his hand. "You don't. Not with me." He turned and kissed my knuckles. And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe I wasn't carrying everything alone anymore. There's something haunting about loving someone who once hurt you. Your body remembers the sting, even as your heart tries to rewrite the story. Some part of me will always remember the sting of those high school days. But now when I look at him, When he's asleep next to me, face softened, one arm slung across my chest like he's afraid I'll disappear, I don't see the boy who laughed behind my back. I see the man who's learning how to love out loud. And God, he holds me like he's afraid to let go. Some nights, I wake up and he's already awake, lying next to me in the dark, his fingers tracing invisible shapes along my shoulder blade. He never says anything in those moments, just touches me like he's memorizing the contours of something fragile. And sometimes I wonder if he's still waiting for me to push him away. If some part of him thinks this is temporary, a dream he's not allowed to keep. I remember the first time I told him I loved him. It wasn't planned. We were fighting, actually, our first real fight. He'd pulled away again, gone cold for 2 days without explanation. No texts, no visits, just silence. When I finally confronted him, he looked at me like I'd caught him doing— "For what?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. "To decide whether this means anything to you." He flinched. "Don't do that." "Don't do what, Landon? Ask you if I matter?" He sat down on the edge of my bed, burying his face in his hands. "You do. God, you do. That's the problem." And then he told me that sometimes it still felt like he didn't deserve me, that he hated who he'd been in high school, and every time I looked at him with softness in my eyes, it made him feel like a fraud. "I was cruel to you," he whispered, "and you're still here. You still look at me like I'm worth something." "You are," I said, my voice breaking. "You're worth everything to me." He looked up. His eyes were rimmed red. And I just said it, without thinking, without ceremony. "I love you." The air between us collapsed. He stared at me like the words physically knocked the wind out of him. Then, so softly I almost missed it, he said, "Say it again." So I did. And then he kissed me like he was starving, like he'd been holding his breath for years and was finally coming up for air. That night changed something between us. It wasn't that everything suddenly got easier, but something settled, like we'd both finally let ourselves stop running. He started staying over more often, started leaving little things at my place, a toothbrush, a hoodie, his favorite mug. And one night, when he thought I was asleep, I heard him whisper, "This feels like home." It's been almost a year now. There are still echoes of the past. People from high school who do double takes when they see us together. Old friends of his who raise eyebrows. Sometimes I catch glimpses of shame flicker through him when someone from the past resurfaces. But he doesn't flinch away anymore. He doesn't laugh it off or pretend I'm not there. Once we ran into one of his old teammates from the football team, a guy who used to walk the hallways with him back when they made fun of boys like me. He looked from me to Landon, then smirked. And Landon, without missing a beat, slipped his hand into mine and said, "This is my boyfriend." The guy didn't know what to say. But I did. I smiled. Not at the guy, but at Landon, because I knew how much courage that took. He's not perfect, neither am I. There are still days when his past swallows him whole, days when I wake to find him on the couch staring blankly at nothing, lost in thoughts he won't share, but he always comes back, always finds his way to me. And when he holds me now, it's not the way people hold something they think they might lose. It's the way people hold something they've finally decided they're allowed to keep. The boy who once laughed behind my back now buries his face in my neck and says, "Don't leave," when he thinks I'm pulling away. He kisses my scars, seen and unseen, and says, "I'm sorry," without words, over and over, with every soft touch and every act of quiet love. People change, and sometimes, when you least expect it, the one who once made you feel invisible becomes the one who sees you more clearly than anyone else ever could. He used to laugh with his friends behind my back. Now he holds me like I'm the only thing keeping him from falling apart. And somehow, after everything, I hold him right back. There was a night in late fall, cold enough to see our breath, but not yet winter, when everything felt like it clicked into place. We were walking back to my apartment after dinner, fingers laced, sharing quiet laughter about something stupid he'd said. The world felt soft around the edges. For once, there was no weight between us. As we crossed the street, he stopped and pulled me close, right there, under the amber glow of a street lamp. The light cast halos around his hair, and for a second I felt like I was watching a version of him from another life. A boy who never hurt me. A man who had always known. But it wasn't a fantasy. It was him. Here. With me. He kissed me gently. There was no urgency in it, just peace. And when he pulled back, he said, "I'm not scared anymore." It took me a second to understand what he meant. "Of what?" I asked. He smiled, that soft kind of smile I'd grown to love, fragile and full of meaning. "Of who I am. Of how I feel about you. Of being seen." I hadn't realized I was holding my breath until I let it out. Then he said, "Thank you for waiting for me to catch up." And I did cry then, right there in the middle of the sidewalk, like a scene in some indie film. Not because I was sad, but because I realized how far we'd come. From whispered slurs in crowded hallways to whispered love in the quiet of night. The boy who once tried to erase me with laughter had become the man who anchored me in silence. We spent that night wrapped in each other. He lay behind me in bed, one arm draped across my waist, his nose pressed against the back of my neck. At some point I woke up and just lay there, listening to the sound of his breath, slow and steady, like the ocean coming home to shore. In the quiet, I thought about forgiveness. How it's not always a one-time decision. Sometimes it's something you choose over and over again. Every time the past whispers, "You should still hate him." Every time a scar aches. Every time you remember what it felt like to be 15 and scared. But love, real love, isn't just about romance or butterflies. It's about choosing someone over and over, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. And he chooses me, now, every day. He holds me like I'm sacred, like letting go would mean losing the most honest part of himself. Once he told me, "Loving you is the only thing I've ever done that feels like it makes sense." I don't know what the future looks like. I don't know if the ghosts of our past will ever fully leave us alone. But I know this. He used to laugh with his friends behind my back. Now, when he laughs, it's with me. In my kitchen while I'm burning pancakes. In the car when we're screaming old pop songs off key. In bed when I roll over and kiss his shoulder just to see him blush. And when he holds me, really holds me, it's not out of fear anymore. It's out of love. Pure, quiet, earned.